The laughter hit me before the words did. Sharp. Public. Designed to sting. We were standing in the middle of the ballroom, crystal lights blazing overhead, champagne flutes clinking like punctuation marks in a conversation I hadn't been invited into. My sister, Vanessa Hart, had one hand wrapped possessively around her partner's arm and the other gesturing lazily in my direction, as if I were a coat someone had forgotten to hang up. Her voice carried. She wanted it too. People nearby smiled awkwardly. A few laughed too quickly. Others pretended to adjust their jackets or check their phones, but I noticed something else first, the pause. The way conversation slowed. The way heads subtly turned toward us. Vanessa didn't notice that part. She never did. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the same one I'd lived with since we were teenagers. The unspoken comparison. The label she'd slapped on me years ago and never bothered to remove. The quiet one. The unambitious one. The sister who didn't sparkle loudly enough to matter. Tonight was supposed to be about her. A charity gala. Black tie. A room full of investors, executives, and people who smiled like they were born knowing how. Vanessa thrived here. She'd rehearsed for weeks. Her dress, her laugh, her introductions. She'd told me to come if you want, like she was inviting me to a dentist appointment. So I came. Not for her. For myself. Her partner, Ethan Cole, finally looked at me, really looked at me, with polite confusion. He was tall, polished, the kind of man who asked questions only when he felt safe asking them. His eyes flicked from me to the people around us, then back again. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice but not enough. If she's so unimportant, he said, gesturing subtly toward the growing circle of attention, why does it feel like the whole room just stopped breathing? The air shifted. I could feel it. That moment right before something breaks, or changes forever. Vanessa scoffed, rolling her eyes. People stare at anything unusual. That word landed hard. Unusual. I smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was over. I met Ethan's gaze and answered him with a single word. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just clear. Because. That was all. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, respectful. The kind that drops when people suddenly realize they've been standing too close to the truth without recognizing it. Across the room, a man in a navy tuxedo froze mid-sip. A woman near the stage straightened abruptly. Someone whispered my name, not Vanessa's. Mine. Vanessa's smile faltered. I'd seen that look before. The one she got when a conversation went off script. What does that mean? She asked, forcing a laugh. Because what? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. A voice cut in from behind us. Calm. Confident. Familiar. There you are. I turned. Marcus Reed stepped into view, his presence changing the temperature of the room the way a storm changes the sky. CEO of Reed Financial Group. Host of the event. The man whose name was printed in gold on the program everyone had received at the door. Vanessa stiffened. Marcus looked directly at me, his expression warm and unguarded. I was wondering when you'd arrive. The whispers grew louder. Vanessa blinked. You know her? Marcus smiled. Know her? Vanessa, I've been trying to introduce her to half this room. He turned to the crowd, raising his glass slightly, not for a toast, just enough to command attention. For those of you who haven't met her yet, he said, this is Lena Hart. My name rippled through the room. Vanessa's fingers tightened around her clutch. Marcus continued, she's the lead strategist behind the Crescent Initiative. The reason this fundraiser surpassed its goal before dinner was even served. A beat. She's also the reason my company will be announcing its largest expansion next quarter. The room reacted all at once. Gasps. Murmurs. A sudden shift as people recalculated everything they thought they knew. Faces that had dismissed me minutes ago now leaned forward, eager, respectful. Vanessa stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. That's not, she started. Marcus tilted his head, polite but firm. Is there a problem? Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, smiled too wide. No. Of course not. I watched her carefully. Not with anger. with clarity. This wasn't about humiliating her. Not yet. This was about reclaiming space. Marcus leaned closer to me. You okay? I nodded. I am now. Across the room, people were already moving toward us. Investors, board members, people who suddenly remembered they'd been meaning to meet me. Ethan looked between Vanessa and me, his confusion deepening. Lena, he said slowly, why didn't you ever mention? I met his eyes. You never ask. That landed harder than any insult. Vanessa laughed again, sharp and brittle. Well, isn't this unexpected? I smiled at her then. A real one. Funny how that works, I said. People only notice when they're forced to look. Her smile collapsed. The night continued, but nothing was the same. Vanessa stayed quiet after that. Ethan drifted away, pulled into conversations he didn't understand anymore. And I stood there, grounded, finally seen, not because I demanded it, but because I earned it. This wasn't the end. Not even close. But it was the moment everything shifted. And for the first time in years, I felt something bloom in my chest that had nothing to do with proving myself. It was peace. The shift in the room didn't fade. It sharpened. People who hadn't noticed me before suddenly found reasons to drift closer. A woman with a silver badge from a venture firm asked about the Crescent Initiative. A man from the city council congratulated me like we'd known each other for years. Every conversation felt different now, not hungry, not fake. Curious. Respectful. Vanessa watched it all from a few steps away. She stood straighter than before, chin lifted, smile pasted on so tight it looked painful. Every time someone laughed near me, her eyes flicked over, measuring, recalculating. This was her world, attention, validation, control, and it was slipping through her fingers. Marcus stayed close, not hovering, just present. You're handling this well, he murmured. I exhaled slowly. I've had practice. He glanced toward Vanessa, then back to me. You don't owe anyone an explanation tonight. I know, I said. But I do owe myself honesty. Across the room, Ethan finally broke away from a cluster of donors and approached me again, this time alone. His tone was quieter now, stripped of confidence. I didn't know, he said, about any of this. I nodded. That's usually how it works. He frowned. Vanessa told me you were between things. I smiled, not unkindly. I was. Between being underestimated and being done with it. He looked down, embarrassed. I shouldn't have laughed earlier. No, I said gently. You shouldn't have listened. That landed. He nodded once, then stepped back, leaving more space than before. Vanessa didn't wait long after that. She approached with a glass of champagne she hadn't touched, her heels clicking like punctuation marks again. Only this time, they sounded unsure. Lena, she said, too sweet. Why didn't you tell me? I raised an eyebrow. Tell you what? She gestured vaguely at the room. All this. I took a sip of water, letting the moment breathe. You never ask. Her jaw tightened. You could have said something. And change what? I asked calmly. The way you introduced me? The way you spoke about me like I wasn't standing there? A flicker of guilt crossed her face. Quick, fleeting, buried fast. You're being dramatic. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear. No. I'm being clear. For the first time all night, she had nothing to say. Marcus was called to the stage moments later, and the room gathered for brief remarks. I stood near the back, content to listen. As he spoke about impact, integrity, and people who work quietly without demanding credit, I felt eyes turn toward me. Not because I asked for them to, but because the words pointed in my direction. Applause followed. Real applause. Vanessa clapped too. Slowly. When the program ended, Marcus found me again. I meant what I said, he told me. About expanding. I want you leading the next phase. I smiled, feeling something settle into place. I'd like that. Vanessa overheard. Of course she did. Her voice came out strained. You're leaving town? For a while, I said. Opportunity has a way of calling. She hesitated, then forced a laugh. Well, Good for you. I met her eyes. Not with anger. Not with triumph. With closure. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, I said honestly. She blinked, caught off guard. Not by the words, but by the fact that I meant them. As the night wound down, I stepped outside onto the terrace. Cool air, city lights, quiet at last. The noise behind me faded into a distant hum. For years, I thought revenge had to be loud, public, sharp. But standing there, steady and whole, I realized the truth. The strongest response wasn't proving her wrong. It was outgrowing the space where her words ever mattered. And I wasn't finished yet. The city looked different from the terrace. Not brighter, clearer. I stayed out there longer than I needed to, letting the cool air slow my pulse. Inside, the gala continued without me, and for once, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I had already crossed the line I'd spent years staring at from the other side. When I finally went back in, most of the crowd had thinned. The noise softened into low conversations and polite goodbyes. Jackets were being collected. Drivers were being called. Vanessa was still there. She stood near the exit, scrolling on her phone like she was trying to anchor herself to something familiar. When she noticed me, she hesitated, then straightened, like she was bracing for impact. "Lena," she said, "can we talk?" I considered it. Not because I owed her anything, but because I was no longer afraid of the conversation. "Sure," I said. We moved to a quieter corner near the coat check. The silence between us wasn't hostile. It was heavy with everything we'd never said. "I didn't mean for it to come out like that," she began. "Earlier." I didn't interrupt. She exhaled. "I guess I just didn't think you cared." That almost made me laugh. Almost. "I cared," I said. "I just stopped showing it when it became a weakness." Her shoulders dropped a fraction. "You've changed." "I've grown," I corrected. "There's a difference." She nodded slowly. "I didn't know how to place you anymore." And instead of admitting that, I made a joke. I studied her face. For the first time in a long while, I saw not a rival or a shadow, but a sister who had built her confidence on always being ahead. "I don't want to compete with you," I said. "I never did." Her voice softened. "I think I did." The admission hung between us, fragile and honest. "I hope you're happy," she said after a moment. I smiled, small but real. "I am. And I hope one day you don't feel like you need to shrink other people to feel tall." She swallowed. "That wasn't fair of me." "No," I agreed. "But tonight doesn't have to be about that." A pause. "Congratulations," she said quietly. "It wasn't perfect. It wasn't dramatic. But it was enough." We parted without an embrace, but without bitterness either. That felt like progress. Outside, my phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Details for the next morning's meeting. Another from an unknown number congratulating me on the initiative. Then one more. "Ethan, I owe you an apology." No expectations, just honesty. I didn't respond. Some doors don't need reopening to feel resolved. Instead, I walked the rest of the way home, heels in hand, the city humming around me. Every step felt lighter than the last. Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. The expansion plans became real. Meetings turned into decisions. Decisions turned into impact. I traveled, spoke, built, quietly, intentionally. People listened. Not because I demanded space, but because I held it naturally now. Vanessa and I spoke less, but when we did, it was different. Neutral. Respectful. Healing in its own way. One afternoon, Marcus called me into his office. "We're launching a new leadership panel," he said. "I want you as the face of it." I raised an eyebrow. "The face?" He smiled. "You represent something people need to see." I thought of the gala, the laughter, the silence that followed one word. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." The announcement went live a week later. Articles followed. Interviews. Messages from women I'd never met, thanking me for existing the way I did. Not loud. Not small. Just enough. That night, I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting a blazer before a live panel, and caught my own reflection. I didn't see the girl my sister once dismissed. I saw someone who had learned that being overlooked was never the same as being unimportant. And the best part? The story wasn't over yet. The lights of the studio were softer than the ballroom had been. No crystal chandeliers. No forced laughter. Just a clean stage, a calm audience, and a quiet sense of purpose humming beneath everything. As I took my seat on the panel, I felt steady, rooted in something deeper than approval. The moderator introduced me last. When my name was spoken, the applause wasn't explosive. It was warm, earned. I began speaking the way I always did, clearly, honestly, without embellishment. I talked about strategy, yes, but also about resilience. About how often capable people are overlooked because they don't fit someone else's idea of importance. As I spoke, I noticed someone in the audience. Vanessa. She sat near the back, arms folded, listening, not watching for reactions, not scanning the room. Just listening. When our eyes met, she nodded once. Not proud, not defensive, respectful. After the event, a young woman approached me, her hands slightly trembling. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. I've been told my whole life to be quieter, smaller. I smiled. You don't have to be louder, I told her. Just be solid. Her eyes shone. I'll remember that. Moments like that stayed with me. Weeks passed. Projects grew. The leadership panel expanded nationwide. I found myself mentoring people who reminded me of who I used to be: brilliant, patient, underestimated. One afternoon, I received an invitation. A family dinner. From Vanessa. I considered it longer than I needed to. Not because I was afraid, but because I finally had a choice. I went. The house felt familiar and distant at the same time. The old dynamics hovered, but they didn't control the room anymore. Vanessa introduced me differently this time. No jokes. No disclaimers. This is my sister, Lena, she said simply. She leads the Crescent Initiative. No one laughed. No one questioned it. Later, as we stood by the kitchen window, she spoke quietly. I'm glad you didn't disappear after the gala. I didn't disappear, I said. I just stopped waiting to be invited. She smiled faintly. I'm learning. I believed her. That night, as I drove home, I thought about the word that had changed everything. Not a title, not a reveal, just truth, delivered without apology. Months later, at another event, smaller, quieter, I found myself standing beside Marcus again. He raised his glass toward me. You know, he said, people still talk about that night. I laughed softly. Let me guess. The silence. He nodded. It made them think. I looked around the room. Faces relaxed. Conversations open. No hierarchy hanging in the air. I think, I said, that's all I ever wanted. As the evening wound down, my phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. Proud of you. I typed back 2 words. Thank you. Not because I needed it, but because I was finally in a place where I could receive it without it defining me. I stepped outside, breathing in the night air, feeling complete in a way I never had before. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't underestimated. I was exactly where I belonged. And the room would never go quiet for me again because now they listened.